Okay, we're climbing up to our level off altitude on a flight today from Toledo, Ohio to Ronald Reagan, Washington, D.C. We're in the Quality Wings 787-10 and this video is the descent, approach, and landing. We're going to assume that we've been cleared to descend via the star. In this case, the star that we're cleared to descend on is the FRDMM 5 RNAV arrival. This will start at Bucko, which you can see has just appeared on our navigation screen right here. And it is about 140 miles out with our descent point a little bit before it. A bunch of altitude restrictions that we'll brief as we fly down the approach. Then we will, it has two different exits. We're going to Ronald Reagan, so we're going to take the northern one to Fergie, and then we'll fly the RNAV approach into runway 19 in Ronald Reagan. Okay, I'm back with you now, approaching our star at Bucko. It's a pretty challenging descent profile, so we'll be using the flight level change to manage it. We have some atypical speed restrictions that we need to hit as well. I will be canceling IFR just because the P3D ATC can't handle stars, so I'm just going to artificially cancel that now, but pretend that we're still on an ATC clearance. And then I'm going to go down to flight level 310, which is where I'm supposed to start the star. We already had our FMC message warning for us to set in the altitude that we'll be descending to when we hit the top of descent point. But because I'm descending to flight level 310 now, we'll just leave 310 in there for the moment, and then I'll put in 1500, which will be, well, I'll put in 3000, which will be the end of the star, and then when we get close to that, I'll put in 1500, which is the final approach fix on the RNAV. Pretty fun. This is a pretty fun star, pretty fun approach into Ronald Reagan. With flight level change, the way the autopilot works is it'll bring the throttles to idle if the flight level changes a descent, and then uses pitch to maintain the target airspeed that you've put in for your indicated airspeed. As we get down below flight level 300, I can even turn that indicated airspeed up, and I'll turn it up to about 310 to make sure we have a nice descent profile. It's a fairly steep descent, and we have some, like I said, some speed restrictions, which will make it a little harder to get down as fast, so we'll be nice and aggressive from the beginning. It says we're coming up on flight level 310. The quality wings doesn't seem to calculate the descents and the profiles quite as well as the PMDG or the Flight Sim Labs planes does, but it's still pretty good. But we have to be a little more proactive manually. Down here we see our RNAV values. So RNP is the required navigation performance. So to be flying this GPS routing that we're using here, we need to have 2-mile accuracy, and we have 0.05 mile accuracy, so we're well within tolerances. As we get lower on the approach, this may change to require more accuracy for final approach type procedures. And you always have to monitor this to make sure that your navigation performance of your aircraft is meeting the requirements. So we're approaching Bucko, where we need to be at flight level 310. And then we'll start our descent. Our next fix is Darren, where we need to be between 310 and 270. I'll go here into this menu, turn on our 2 VORs, get a little more situational awareness, and I'll turn on data so we have some information at our waypoints.
Please check that your seatbelt is securely fastened. To prepare for landing, it will be necessary to collect all service items, as well as any other items you wish to discard, such as newspapers.
Get the seatbelt sign on. It's about 10 miles to Bucko. at which point I will put in the 3,000 feet as the altitude that we're targeting. feet, assuming that we are cleared to descend via. Our star. So after Bucko, Darren is between 310 and 270, and after that is Honor between 240 and 280, but at 280 knots. So I'm going to use flight level change so we can get down a little bit more quickly. Set 310 knots so that we have some chance to slow down and hit our target airspeeds and all these altitude restrictions. Already made our altitude restriction for Darren. Okay, now we've made our altitude restriction for Honor being below 280, so I can set this back to 280 knots now. And you'll see it will pitch up. So it won't be descending as much anymore while it captures 280 knots. And then it'll start back down. Honor needs to be between 240 and 280. So we fly this star in, we split off to the north at Foxtrot Romeo Delta Mike Mike to take the Fergie transition for the RNAV into DCA. The RNAV is sort of a twisty little flight path down along the river there, and lots of restricted airspaces, most particularly to the northeast is the White House. So we have to make sure we don't overfly that. This approach will be climbing turn to 3,000 and climb and holding. Okay, passed honor. For bravery, we need to be between 220 and 260. So we're already made that restriction. And still at 280 knots. Thousand feet.
Descent checklist.
Check. Let's check. Set our auto brake to 2. Our landing data. We'll use 30 degrees of flap. Already did the approach briefing. Descent checklist complete. So for courage, we need to be between 200 and 230, still at 280 knots, so coming up on 200 right now. So we'll set this back to VNAV and set it to 280. And then after that will be pledge. We need to be between 15,000 and 17,000, still at 280 knots. Here comes our 20,000 foot restriction. Okay, now down to pledge, so let flight level change again. You'll see the nose pitches down, throttles come back to idle, maintain 280 knots. Get our descent rate up so that at pledge we can be between 15 and 17. Pledge is 14 miles away. We're doing 6 miles a minute, so it's about 2.5 minutes. We need to lose 2,000 feet, so anything over 1,000 feet per minute should be fine. Doing 1,400 feet per minute now, so I believe we'll be okay. If it starts to look like we're not going to make it, then I can deploy the speed brakes spoilers. Coming up on 18,000 feet. We'll go back to regular altimeter settings. Altimeter is 290902. Okay, a little over a minute to go. Less than 1,000 feet. We're doing 1,500 feet a minute. Should be all right. Now, after pledge, our altitude restrictions are all at or aboves until FRDMM, at which point we need to be right at 8,000. However, at forget, we need to be at 250 knots, at or above 11. Pass at 16. Our next restriction is to be at or above 15 at pledge, so we made that. We will should be at or above 14. Zoom in. I'll go ahead and start slowing down now. Since we need to stay above 14 anyway. So there's our target of 250. For never, we should be at or above 12. we will never forget. So forget 250 knots at or above 11. It's September 11th, 250 knots at or above 10. Altimeters are set.
Approach checklist.
Altimeters are set. Approach checklist complete. Now for always, we need to be at or below 10, and we can start slowing to 240 knots. At FRDMM, we have a hard altitude of 8,000. Six miles to lose 1,000 feet, about 5 miles a minute. Should make it pretty close. Okay, 8,000 feet. And to 3,000 feet. Start slowing down a little more. Add some flaps for drag.
Ladies and gentlemen, in preparation for landing, please return all seat backs and tray tables to their upright and stowed position. Ensure all portable electronic devices are turned off and stow all carry-on items. Additionally, footrests and video monitors must be returned to their original position. Thank you.
So we had 3,000 feet at Fergie. And then we'll descend along the RNAV approach down to 2,600 at Derrick, 1,700 at Grays, and then 1,500 at Seatalk. And then as we fly the arcs, multiple arcs into the runway 19, we'll be maintaining a 3% descent. Two checked. Coming up on our 3,000 foot altitude. Slow down to 180. Another notch of flaps for some more drag. Two 902 set. Okay, there's Fergie. We'll set this down to 1,500 now. Go ahead and get our gear down. 170. Okay, 2600. It's looking good.
2500.
For grays, we want to be at 1700. Go 15 on the flaps.
Flight attendants, please be seated for arrival.
So 160. Runways in sight. Coming up on Sea Talk after grays. We're aiming for 1500 feet. Flaps 20. And we'll slow to approach speed 148. Those are 1500 feet. Rock off our autopilot. And we'll set about 3 degrees nose low. Flying the arc in. Flaps full.
1000.
1000 feet above.
Landing checklist.
Landing checklist is complete.
Pull 400.
Quite steep.
300. Approaching minimums. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Alright, down. Reversers. Okay, auto brakes off. First reversers in. That was sporty at the end, but hopefully this helps.